Well, I'm pleased to welcome each of you to this program, which is sponsored by the J. Phillips Center for Interfaith Learning. Some of you are familiar with our center, and some of you may be coming to an event for the first time. Back over here, we have some of our student interfaith leaders. Brenna Horn in the green back there has been an interfaith coordinator for us for the last, well, this is her third year. And Vicki Leo, back over here, is working with Brenna now. And Angela Dahls and Lucas Ramsey are also involved with the center's interfaith leadership team. And so they have, if any of you are interested in getting involved in the Interfaith Leaders Group, there's a sign-up sheet and there's an email list back there. Any of you want to get on our email list, we're welcome you to do that. And they'll be happy to tell you all about the work that they're doing as interfaith leaders here. We, at the center, sponsor a variety of types of programs. This is one type, the public event type of a program like this, and you're all very welcome. And it's really a delight for me to have this opportunity to introduce to you Rabbi David Wirtschafter, who is our rabbi in residence this year. He was rabbi in residence with us last fall, fall 2012, and he's back by popular demand. In fact, a lot of you have probably met him. He's been in a number of classes, and if you haven't met him, you're in for a treat tonight, and perhaps you will along the way as he visits some classes, and also next semester he'll be teaching a course here as well on the introduction to Judaism, so you may be interested in signing up for that. Also, he's very generously opening his home to about 12 people. Brenna and Vicki are organizing this, a Shabbat, so Sabbath evening dinner for students down in the Twin Cities. The people that go will go to a synagogue service and go to his home for a Sabbath dinner, Shabbat dinner. So about 12, David?
If you bring Ben and Jerry's ice cream, you can come.
Okay. Yeah. So, and you're in Minneapolis, right?
Just over the town line.
Right. And we'll provide transportation. The J. Phillips Center will provide transportation. Rabbi David grew up part of the time of his growing up was in Minneapolis. He eventually went to Brandeis out in Massachusetts, where he got a degree in English literature. And right out of Brandeis, he dove into rabbinical studies. He was saying he was wondering maybe you should have taken a year in between, but tonight at dinner. But he went to Hebrew Union College in New York, where he got a degree in Hebrew literature. And he's given presentations on a wide variety. Well, he has served a number of congregations. He's currently serving in the Ames, Iowa congregation every once in a while. They don't have enough of a community to have it's like a lot of Catholic churches and other, kinds of churches in northern Minnesota, for example. They don't have a full-time priest or minister, and David does serve part-time down in Ames, Iowa. And now some of the Jewish families here in St. Cloud have asked him if he would come up here about once a month and do a service, and he has said yes to that, so we're happy about that. But he's given a lot of presentations on a wide variety of topics, as he did last fall, and is doing again up here in a variety of classes. And I'll just say that his current research has to do with texts that many of us, whether Jewish, Christian, whatever, find disturbing, so in the Bible. So he's been doing, and we talk about that in our class today even, disturbing texts. And so he's somebody who's doing a lot of research on that. And he's also doing a lot of research on contemporary critiques of religion and intelligent responses to those critiques from within Christian and Jewish and Muslim communities. So with that, I just want to welcome Rabbi David Wirtschafter to the podium here.
Good evening.
Let me just say this, David. Everybody should know, sorry, I should have said this, that, we plan for going to about 1 hour from now, about 5 after 9, okay? So, it's all yours.
Thank you. Erev Tov, good evening, everybody. Thank you to John Merkel, to St. John's University, both to the St. Benedict's campus and the St. John's campus. Thank you to Sister Mary Foreman and to the faculty that I got to dine with earlier. And thank you to all of you, students and faculty, for showing up. I could have an argument all by myself, but a vigorous discussion and text with all of you should be more entertaining. I want to begin tonight on a slightly more serious and somber note than I had planned. With your permission, I would like to dedicate tonight's text study to the memory of a great leader here in the state of Minnesota. We just lost Monsignor Jim Haviger. In my family, he was known as Father Jim. So for us classical Reformed Jewish Jews of the Twin Cities, he was our priest. The family priest to the Wirtschafter Jews. And Father Jim would join us for Passover Seders. I got to know him at other interfaith events. He was a close colleague with my mother, Carol. They worked together on many projects, including the Micah Project to address hunger and homelessness in the state of Minnesota. And a wonderful, wonderful person. In Yiddish, we say a mensch, a truly human being. And had a great trait for a clergy or educator person. He remembered names. I saw him recently at the funeral of Rabbi Max Shapiro at Temple Israel, and Father Jim recognized me by name and greeted me warmly and asked about the family. So as this is a Catholic institution and an institution of faith, please accept our heartfelt sympathies on the loss of a great Catholic leader. He will be missed. I want to begin tonight with a question, and it's an ageist question that I apologize. In the Jewish tradition, we're just wrapping up our season of atonement. We call it tshuva, return to God and to one another. So I apologize for the ageist thing I am about to do in advance. Hopefully it won't offend too many of you. I'm going to ask that the first question I throw out there be answered first. We're going to give deference to our elders. I only want you to answer this question for the first few minutes if you are 55 and older. 55 and older. And my working question tonight, before I jump into the realm and the questions of Shabbat rest, is the following. How has technology altered the distinction between private and professional life? How has it altered the distinction between work time and personal time? So the floor is yours right now, and your hand can be up if you are 55 or older. If you grew up in the age of the internet, if you entered this beautiful world of ours and Elmo was already in existence, you can't answer the question yet. Not yet. When my nephew went off to college, I read this study of things that his college-bound class could claim that no one else could. And one of the things was they've never grown up in a world without the internet. They've never grown up in a world without Elmo. So there you have it. How has technology altered the distinction between the private and the professional sphere? How has it changed the distinction between work time and personal time? So first crack at this one goes to those who are 55 and up. Yes, ma'am.
Both accelerated it and blended the second part of your question between work and home.
Okay. It's accelerated it in what way?
It's accelerated it. It's a 24/7 kind of an opportunity to be interrupted and to interrupt. So it takes away from this deep well of the spirit time that we would normally be using our self-awareness with that the Lord gave us.
And when you say blended, is the blending like the house blend at Caribou, where I'm getting the best of both worlds, or is this blending polite code language for something else?
Taking away the differentiation of parenthetic time, so to speak.
I like that, parenthetic time, meaning,
Why? Question.
and in Judaism we call this pilpul. It's word by word instruction. You know the thing about Jews and questions? One of the great things about being Jewish is I can make Jewish jokes and get away with it all day long. I just sit here and do this stuff, Jews being late, Jews being... So, do you know the one about why is it that you Jews always respond to a question with a question?
You're smarter than us.
Why do you ask? Of course I'm asking you questions. Was it parenthetic or parenthetical time?
Whichever form of the word you like.
Okay.
You relax around it.
In either case, define it for me, please.
Right. You're explaining everything, but you're not really living in the moment.
Okay.
Because it's everywhere.
All right, good. Anybody else? Thank you for that wonderful start. Yes?
Yeah, for me, I would say it has some definite negatives in that work just comes home with you, whether you like it or not. If you have a computer there, and you're pretty much required to have one. But the slightly positive thing is that sometimes you can get stuff done that you might, in the old days, have had to do between 9 and 5 at the office. And then you can take time off between 9 and 5 during the week. So sometimes there are slight advantages. But it is definitely, I would completely agree with the previous answer, it has definitely broken down any barrier between work time and home time. Those have now blended into each other.
Okay, so I want you to hold on to this notion that we've heard about twice now of blending between home time and work time. And I want you to hold on to that because we're going to get to this again when we get to our last speaker, not our last speaker, our last commentator, our last thinker of the evening. But think about what it means to be in this parenthetical world where work isn't just limited to what happens at the office or at school, and where so too what was personal and private, whether it's your Facebook page or whether it's your email when somebody else takes your phone because you left it somewhere that you didn't mean to, what the private boundaries are too. Yes, it's true that it's easier for work to follow you home now, whether you want it to or not. But the converse is true. As many people in the interview process these days have found out, that the employer has found out something about you that you thought was completely silly and innocent on Facebook, which your prospective employer neither found silly nor innocent. So the personal is intruding or blending into the workspace as well. What does it mean to be using the work-provided computer for work? Well, can I check on the sale at Nordstrom Rack? Is that a violation of my code of conduct to my employer? Is it wrong if I participate in the NC2A basketball pool with my buddies and track how my teams are doing? Am I now a bad employee? Do I need the boss screen at the ready when they come, looking to see how efficient I'm being? So it cuts both ways. And on the one hand, we have the word you used, acceleration. So we can send the email, and we can be done with it faster, and we can have the assurance and the documentation that we sent it. And we can reply to things from wherever we are, whether I've got a home crisis I have to deal with at work or a work crisis at home. Because of the technology, I had the flexibility. The other side of it is with the flexibility has become an expectation that I will respond. So in the corporate world, and it's true when I was in the congregational world, and I don't know what the etiquette is on this campus, spoken or unspoken, but what I've heard is in most work settings with regard to email, unless you're on vacation or on personal leave, the etiquette now is you have a 24-hour expected response time. There's a 24-hour expected response time on the email. Now, it doesn't mean you have to resolve all the questions they asked or finish the project. But it does mean that you're supposed to have at least acknowledged whatever it is within 24 hours. That's a very different world for all of you undergraduates than what your parents grew up in. And it's an entirely different world than what your grandparents grew up in. In the end of personal mail, if it weren't for circulars and ads and for solicitations of funds for whatever nonprofit it is, the Postal Service, as we know it, the snail mail, as you all call it, would be dead in the water. And already they're looking at cutting back from 6 days of service to 5. Okay. Now I want to float a question out, and I'm going to give first crack at this to those of you who have seen your Disney films more recently. So if you're younger than 55, you can raise your hands first. I want you to think back on that moment in the Disney classic Fantasia, and it's the sketch called The Magicians Apprentice. Mickey Mouse is working for a magician. Nod your heads if this rings a bell with anybody, okay? Good. The Magician's Apprentice. And Mickey figures out how to make the broom fetch water, okay? So the Magician's Apprentice is doing what a good apprentice should do, watching, listening, and learning, and is able to replicate the trick. Who can tell me where Mickey runs into trouble? What's Mickey's problem? Yes, sir. The brooms and the water completely overrun Mickey and the apprentice's headquarters. Mickey hasn't learned how to stop. He's learned the trick. He's learned the incantation. He found the right place in the book. But those of us in the room who are parents, or those of us with a little brother and sister, know is whether you're teaching somebody to drive or to ride a bike, the most essential thing for your trainee to learn is how to stop. Going fast is wonderful. Hey, no hands. That's great. Wow, I have the independence to go to school now. Great, I don't have to drive you there. And our efficiency and our freedom and our flexibility, just like as we heard the 55 and older group say about the technology, goes up. But the question is, do we have the ability to stop? Mickey's not able to get the broom to stop taking water, and when he tries to destroy it, anybody remember this brilliant image? When Mickey takes an axe to the broom, does that solve the problem? What happens? Right? The broom multiplies, and now we've got more brooms incapable of stopping, fetching more water, and flooding the magician's domicile. So we have a problem with stopping. Now, I want to suggest that our topic of rest is a lot more than about stop. For those of us that have prayed as kids or try to get kids to pray, and we get to that moment where we say, please take a moment for silent prayer. Okay, well, that's wonderful. How are we going to define that? Is that about shutting up? Is it about not talking? What shall we do during this not talking? How are we going to find meaning in not talking? How is the quiet different than shutting up? How is the quiet different than silence? What are we trying to accomplish by this stopping of sound? So we're looking at the question of rest. As in music, the conductor raises his or her baton, and we have silence until we get started. The composer may have designed any number of rests to come in over the course of the piece, and then our composition ends with silence. And a brief moment of silence, and then hopefully we get applause, if we liked it. But we have to examine this thing of stopping. And I'm going to suggest for our work tonight that we have to be able to define rest in positive terms. So since this is a Catholic institution, you're very familiar with the term the Via Negativa, the negative way. One thing we can do is define what God isn't. God doesn't have this. God doesn't do that. God doesn't want that. Right? It's much easier to speak in that construct, and we get into much more trouble when we say God loves this, God wants that, God demands X, Y, and Z. The Via Negativa is far easier in terms of beginning our discussion. But I'm going to push us to the Via Positiva. What can we say about rest in the affirmative? What is it beyond stop? What is rest beyond not doing? So we are going to hold our thinkers' feet to the fire, as hopefully a moderator would during presidential and vice presidential debates, to did you answer the question? And our working question tonight is, what is the nature of rest? What defines rest? What are its characteristics? So I want you to use tonight your critical thinking that your science teachers and your literature teachers and your economics teachers and your math teachers have shared with you and imparted and invested in you. Are these thinkers answering the question? And yes, we're in a reverential context. This is a religious institution. I am a religious thinker. We can be reverent, but within being reverent, we also have the space. Let us give each other the liberty to be critical. It is okay to say this rabbi, this thinker, has not answered the question. So we need to give ourselves that space and that trust and that mutual support. Just because this person has a certain title doesn't mean that they're always correct. As my wife likes to remind me, just because I'm a rabbi doesn't mean I'm always right. And as I like to remind her, it doesn't mean I'm always wrong. So I'm going to start with you all in giving you a chance now that we've put the parameters of the conversation in the via posit out rest. Let's start with you all. Let's begin with the wisdom in the room. What defines rest? I'm not even asking you yet to define Sabbath rest or religious rest. What is rest? What are its characteristics? What defines it? Yes? An easiness of mind? Ease of mind. Beautiful. Excellent. Great place to start. So we've got a positive, affirmative statement. There were no no's, there were no negatives, there were no nots. We've got ease of mind. Yes?
Restoration of self.
A restoration of self. Excellent. Some of our thinkers are going to get into that, and of course, because they're Jewish, they're going to problematize it. So you would think that would be straightforward and an obvious good. That thought is going to be put on trial. But yes, self restoration would seem to be a characteristic of rest. Beautiful. Yes?
It's a period of reflection.
Reflection, a period of reflection. Good. Time to think, not just do, but to think. So stillness doesn't mean inactive, right? It doesn't mean we're asleep, but we're thinking, reflecting. It's excellent. I wish people did it more often. Yes, sir? I heard the chaos part. I struggle with the verb that came before. Breaching? Breach? A breach in the chaos. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I think that our world is defined by movement, and sometimes oftentimes unpredictable movement, and that when this unpredictable movement is somehow predictable, that's when we get rest.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yes?
Respite from demands.
A respite from demands. So the expectations, the orders in Judaism, we call them mitzvot, the commandments, the things that have to be done, the to-do list, right, gets a hiatus. Okay, good. So I'm going to try to ask the same question for every thinker. Have we gotten an adequate answer to a working definition of rest? And we're allowed to say yes or no, and we're allowed to say why or why not. So I want you to begin on your study notes here. We've got a number of different texts, a number of different thinkers. I'm going to try to move quickly through them. Our first one is Moses ben Maimon. Maimonides is his name in Greek. In Hebrew, it's known as Rambam, which is an acronym, a mnemonic, if you will, for Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, Rambam. Among other things, he's the personal physician to King Richard the Lionhearted, and Salah ad-Din, the most powerful Christian and the most powerful Muslim ruler of his time. So imagine that there was one personal physician shared by the first shared by the first or second George Bush and Saddam Hussein and bin Laden. We had one doctor, right? One GP for those people. Imagine that. That's Rambam's job. Also a philosopher, poet, and a rabbi now and then. Okay, can I get a volunteer to read this, please? His dates are 1135 to 1204, and he lives in Spain, what we would now call Morocco, and dies in Egypt. Can I get a volunteer to read what he wrote, please? This is taken from his book called The Commandments. It's just English. In rabbinical school, they made us read Hebrew. Yes?
By this injunction, we are commanded to rest on the Sabbath. It is contained in his words, on the seventh day thou shalt rest. And it's repeated several times.
How many times do I have to tell you?
The Exalted One tells us that to rest from all labor is an obligation applying to us, to our cattle, and to our servants. The provisions of this commandment are explained in Tractate Sabbath and in Tractate Yom Tov, that is, Bezah.
Okay, so in case you want to know, good reader, why it is that we need to rest on the Sabbath, it says so in the Scripture. Check your footnotes, right? Exodus 34:21, rest on the Sabbath. And then it's repeated. Now this leads into a rabbinic Jewish device called Gezerah Shava, a fence around the law, and also a concept called there is no such thing as meaningless repetition, unlike parents and professors. There is no such thing as meaningless repetition. If the Bible says it more than once, it has a new reason why each time. So we could apply that with the Jewish dietary laws, which you may know about roughly. Okay? We start with a commandment. Don't boil a calf in its mother's milk. Well, that's nice. Well, we're going to extend that. It got repeated. Sorry, it wasn't just there once. It means don't mix milk and meat. Well, it got repeated again. So now we're going to have separate dishes for milk and meat. It's repeated yet another time. So there's got to be hours in between the eating of a milk meal and a meat meal so as to separate the two in the human stomach. Okay. So we keep making a fence around the law to ensure that what we don't want to happen doesn't happen. I think about it as the sterile environment of the operating room, right? We need to maintain the sterility of that environment. To do so, getting people in a state to be clean enough to go in there is going to begin in other rooms, in other chambers, and we're going to make sure we've got that right? And we're going to put the safety on the gun, and we're going to put it in the gun rack, and we're going to put a lock on the sucker, and we're going to store the ammo separately. You know, all these are about putting a fence around disaster, right, and create as many as you can. Okay. In addition to Torah, we've got from Maimonides reminding us where it came from, repeated in the Talmud, and we get more of the what it means, more detail as to how to observe the Sabbath in a massive tractate called Sabbath, of course, and the other one Yom Tov, meaning literally good days or festive days, and that's where you can read a lot more about it. In this particular book, The Commandments, Maimonides is trying to provide people with the first edition of Judaism for Dummies, how to practice it without having to study a whole lot of philosophy. Now, here's the academic question. Has Rambam given you an adequate definition of rest? Are you satisfied that rest has been defined here? Honestly. I'm seeing a no. Can you tell me about your no?
Sure. It doesn't, it seems the negative, I mean, it still seems the negative. In fact, it just says rest equals don't work. And we decided at the outset that wasn't going to be adequate.
Okay. I didn't hear what defined rest. I saw you repeat the Torah injunction, you need to rest. But then you go on to tell me that we desist from all labor. So you've told me to stop talking, but you haven't told me how to reflect, how to meditate, how to think or to feel, right? Is peace something other than the absence of war and hostilities, right? What is this thing called rest? We didn't hear a whole lot about that. Anybody else? Are we satisfied with our working definition of rest that Mr. Rambam has given us? Okay, let's be fair. Let's delve into the footnotes. A new reader in the note. I can read it, but then you'll have to hear my voice all night. Yes?
Thus God commanded us to abstain from work on the Sabbath and to rest for two purposes, namely that we might confirm the true theory that of the creation, which at once and clearly meets the theory of existence of God. Two, that we might remember how kind God has been in freeing us from the burden of the Egyptians. The Sabbath is therefore a double blessing. It gives us correction notions and also promotes the well-being of our body. The object of Sabbath is obvious and requires no explanation. The rest it affords to man is known. 1/7 of the life of every man, whether small or great, passes thus in comfort and in rest from trouble and affliction. This the Sabbath effects in addition to the perpetuation and confirmation of the grand doctrine of the creation.
Okay, it's a beautiful explanation following up on the injunction to rest. Has the footnote, to go back to our first participant with regard to rest, eased your mind at all? Do you know more about rest now? Did the footnote help you? Not seeing anybody hopping up. Oh, I'm seeing somebody raise their hand saying yes. All right, I'm going to take this lady first, and then I'll get to both of you gentlemen. Yes?
Well, it indicates that we're to be free from exertion. And so he tells me that we're not supposed to exert ourselves, but we can do some kinds of labor, but not to exert the body in intense labor. But he doesn't tell us what degree of labor we can do or not do.
Okay. So he's told me that it's sugar-free gum, but he hasn't told me what kind of gum it is. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not clear to me other than there's some labors that you are allowed to do. Obviously, we're going to have to move our bodies here. We got to go to synagogue. We got to light the Sabbath candles. We have to make the blessing over the wine. So there's going to be some kinds of exertion, but I still, from what I'm getting so far in the footnote, I'm not seeing, and I could be wrong. It's been known to happen from time to time. A definition of rest. I'm still seeing more about the absence of work. Yes? I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
I like the part where it's like it's 1/7 of life passes for comfort, so at least there's something positive that happens there beyond the absence of pain, but at least something comfortable.
Good. Okay, so ease is the presence of comfort, not just the absence of pain or the absence of work, but sort of like ease of mind, we have comfort of the body. Good. We've got an affirmative statement that we can hang our hat on here. Is there more that we can hang our hat on? Yes?
I like the thing about spending a 7th part of every week in comfort. It reminds me of my couch.
Good. So this gets back to the question of rejuvenation and time to be a couch potato and time to sleep, and take a break. But again, is the break or the absence of work helping us to formulate a concrete definition of rest? So it sounds like we've got a split jury on that. Yes?
Well, I think we so far have not mentioned the last line in that paragraph, which is that the Sabbath effects in addition to the perpetuation and confirmation of the grand doctrine of creation. In other words, Sabbath is inscribed in creation, and so by observing it, you're participating in that grand structure.
Okay, good. And this is something we're going to see from our other thinkers, that Sabbath, and presumably that's shorthand right now for the subject of Sabbath rest, and in particular, is a amatio Dei, and a holy imitation of God, and a perpetuation and confirmation of the grand doctrine of creation. That is, the ultimate respect to the Creator is not to create anything on that date. We will not change the nature of anything or make it better or make it different, but by doing as little as possible, by that moment of silence, we recognize how limited words are, right, to speak to a tragedy on the dimension or scale of a 9/11, right? Or, I cried tears of joy. No words can express the joy you feel, right? So, again, it's that sense that the ultimate compliment that we can pay is to stop all action. Good. Okay. Anybody else on Mr. Rambam here? What I'm seeing is that he's defining the benefits of the Sabbath, and perhaps it's the absence of the word. The Sabbath is therefore a double blessing, because I don't see Sabbath rest is therefore a double blessing, or rest itself gives us, corrects our notions. Maybe if the wording had been different. But what I'm seeing so far is some work needing to be done to tell me more about rest. It's a good beginning, I grant you, better than I could have done, but I want to know more about it. So let's take a look at our next thinker, jumping ahead many centuries, Rabbi Isaac Klein. Dates are 1905 to 1979. Conservative, end of conservative Judaism in New York. Unfortunately, he dies the year that this particular book is published in 1979. A new reader, please, for our second text. Oh, be brave, please. Read. Come on, read. Yes.
The term resting covers a whole range of activities which are not strictly work, but are to be avoided because they are not in the spirit of the Sabbath, or because doing them may lead to acts that constitute a major discretion of the Sabbath. These include discussing business matters, asking a Gentile what is forbidden for a Jew to do on the Sabbath.
Hey, buddy, could you lift that box up?
Making preparations during the Sabbath for a forbidden act that will be done immediately upon the conclusion of the Sabbath.
Sabbath plotting.
For example, packing a suitcase for a journey, sweeping or washing an unpaved floor, doing heavy work that is permitted but requires great effort, reading business correspondence, hiring laborers to work during the week. These prohibitions seem particularly burdensome today, but the truth is that they can be no real Sabbath without
Shavut, rest.
It is, in effect, a means of preserving the special character of the Sabbath.
So what do you see going on, especially in that last sentence? What is Rabbi Klein trying to do? What is he trying to juggle here?
Busyness versus rest.
Right. I know this is hard. No one said this was easy, right? I know it's hard to do nothing. I want to do things. On the other hand, it's not really the Sabbath without this essential ingredient of rest. Again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record player or a skipping DVD, if that's the equivalent today, have you been given an adequate definition of what rest is? Are you satisfied that you have an affirmative, positive characteristic of what rest means? And it's okay to say yes or no. Personally, I'm... anybody? Okay. Yes?
When up to Maimonides, I was, there seems to be something about perception of God, that the work of rest is to become receptive to a confirming of a theory, and maybe we didn't say that earlier. And then in this one, something about preserving the special character of the Sabbath, that seems to be one of the only positive comments.
Right. For me, I don't feel that I've gotten an adequate answer here from Klein, unfortunately. It started off promising with this, this statement about shavut, like the word Shabbat, resting. But what ends up happening is falling into this pitfall, as many thinkers did as I researched this, of defining not working, categories of not working, loopholes of not working, limitations around it, softenings of not working so that we can actually put lunch out on the table after 2 hours of services. But I don't have a statement of the qualities of rest. What is, to use responsive classroom theory, right? What does rest look like, sound like, feel like? So when you're teaching little kids, you should be able to describe to yourself as a teacher or anybody observing you, what will quiet study time or what will math time or what will circle time or class debate time look like, sound like, feel like? And I'm not hearing it here. All right. Good. Yes?
Although I don't think this is a complete definition of rest, I think it does ameliorate our definition, or our working definition, because I think it does.
I'm glad you said working definition.
It kind of adds, like being present, because I think, we talked about being reflective and resting and stuff, but it says you're not supposed to make preparations for things that you do immediately after the Sabbath or immediately after resting. So it's not only not working or resting, but it's not even preparing for work again.
No, I really love that. In Judaism, in Hebrew, we call it kavanah, your intentionality. And you use the word presence. Are you really present in the moment, or are you just getting through it, right? Are you paying attention at the meeting and caring about people's feelings and opinions, or are you texting your significant other, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or your parents, right, from the cell phone, or even thinking about what you might say to them on the cell phone or the email? Are we fully present in the moment? And the ability of the Sabbath, via Sabbath rest, to be present for others and to be present for God. Okay, let's move forward. So our next thinker is Rabbi Ari A Kaplan, and his dates are 1934 to 1983. And he has an essay. You can find it right there online. You can click on the link or the URL or whatever that is. The Sabbath, Day of Eternity, Tannenbaum Library Series. So now he's going to take his shot at defining what this is. He's a Orthodox authority, which on our political religious spectrum is to the right of the conservative, yet not quite what we would call ultra-Orthodox. A new reader, please. Yes, and then I'll call on you. You're on deck. Go ahead. Yes.
Many of us realize the importance of the Sabbath, but have confused ideas about how to keep it. After all, rest has many connotations. For some, it may mean a relaxing game of golf.
Right. If I play golf, is that resting on Shabbat? I'm not working. I'm not a professional golf player. Lord knows I'm no Tiger Woods. I'm not, getting paid to do this. So what's the problem? Keep going.
For others, it may be an afternoon watching television. Others may think of rest as reading a good book, painting a picture, or writing a poem.
Okay, you see where he's going with this? It may be a break. I may be not working, but that can't possibly be enough, because there's a certain holiness, a certain sanctity, perhaps in the secular sense or utilitarian sense, the behavioral sense, these things wouldn't classify, these things could be called restful, but they don't quite make the cut by the religious definition.
Somehow these ideas do not seem to fit the Jewish idea of Shabbat.
I wonder how he arrived at that conclusion.
The Sabbath is supposed to remind us of the drama of creation. But exactly how does this work? How does the Sabbath bring us to recall this?
Okay, so this goes back to what you saw in Klein and even earlier in Maimonides, that we're celebrating the creation story by not creating.
If we think of the Sabbath as a day of rest from a hard week's work,
It's been a hard day's night.
then these rules do not make any sense at all. These rules
Can't do that.
One may not pluck a single blade of grass, write down a telephone number, or put a pot on the stove to boil, even though none of these things involve much physical effort. We are told that riding a car is work, even though walking certainly involves more effort.
You know, I live in the 20th century, right? I'm Rabbi Ari A Kaplan. I'm not writing in Poland in the 16, 17, 1800s. I get it. I get that we live in this thing called modernity. I understand that walking to synagogue, because I'm forbidden to be in a car, because a car has an ignition system and you can't light a fire. Somebody gets killed in the Bible for doing that on Shabbat. Okay? One of the things you can get the capital punishment for in the Bible, Sabbath breaking. Okay? I get that this doesn't make sense logically, but I affirm it, Ari A Kaplan, religiously. How does he solve that disconnect? How do we get around that problem? Yes?
I think it basically comes in terms of the fact that he's using a functional definition rather than an analytical one. We've been searching for what would seem to be an analytical definition, a very precise, even mathematical identity, and I don't think we're going to get that. But he's given us a pretty nice functional definition. So I'd like to point that out.
Good. Okay.
So Dave, if you wanted a 15-minute warning, and I'm way back there, I should have been up in the front row. You're there, 15.
All right. I'm at the 15-minute.
Or 16 or 17.
Okay. All right. Do we have an adequate definition of rest now from Kaplan? Are we hearing more? Yes. Sure. So the not walking goes beyond a certain length in the Orthodox community, in a strict observant community. Okay, would be not walking beyond a certain distance, i.e., your home to synagogue. Okay, conservative movement, the only place where you can take the car to and from on Friday night through Saturday night is the synagogue. So you're allowed to use your car. You're allowed to embrace technology for that. You don't have to be stuck by the tundra or by the soaked by the rainstorm. Huge loopholes allow for the cooking of food. All kinds of loopholes allowed for you to cook and for you to move around your house. Okay, it's never meant to be a complete day of renunciation or abstaining of food and drink and all of that. It's not a fast day or a day of solemnity. It's a day of celebration. Okay. I want to get into our final thinker. Would encourage you on your own to read the paragraph about God's rest. Again, Amatio Dei. Creation is completed by rest on day 7. The only thing that happens is 7. The only thing that happens on day 7 is the rest, and yet it is the rest and the act of rest that completes the work of creation. So our last thinker is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and now I feel somewhat like the person who brings coal to Newcastle, because we have right here in the room a world-class expert in Abraham Joshua Heschel and Professor Merkel, and yet here I am bringing coal to Newcastle because I can't find anybody who so profoundly and poetically explains what rest is and stays away from the trap of saying rest is the absence of work. So now you're actually going to get a very clear statement as to what rest actually means. Let's begin with the problem. And Heschel will get to the problem that those of us 55 and older pointed out. Sir in the yellow T-shirt who wanted to read earlier. I think you're beginning with technical civilization.
Technical civilization is man's concept of space, that is a triumph frequently achieved by sacrificing the essential ingredient of existence, namely time. In technical civilization, Yet to have more does not mean to be more. The power we attain in the world of space terminates abruptly at the borderline of time, that time is the heart of existence. To gain control of the world of space is certainly one of our tasks. The danger begins when in gaining power in the realm of space we forfeit all aspirations in the realm of time. There is a realm of time where the goal is not to have but to be, but not to own but to give, not to control but to share, not to subdue but to be in the core.
And in that realm of time he speaks of course, is the Sabbath, where it's not about competition or acquisition, about spending. I'm not defined by what I buy or what I got done at work, but I am defined by who I am, by what I believe, by who I love, by what I love. Good. Now he's going to get very creative with language here. Let's skip to "we are all infatuated with." A new reader? Skipping to the paragraph "we are all infatuated with." Yes, thank you.
We are all infatuated with the splendor of space and the grandeur of things in space.
What a beautiful ballpark.
Thing is a category that lies heavy on our minds, tyrannizing all of our thoughts. Our imagination tends to mold all concepts of in it. Our daily lives we attend primarily to that which the senses are spelling out for us, to what the eye perceives, to what the fingers touch. Reality to us is things, consisting of substances that occupy space. Even God is conceived by most of us as a thing. The result of our thinginess is our blindness to all reality that fails to identify itself as a thing, as a matter of fact. This is obvious in our understanding of time, which, being thingless and insubstantial, appears to us as if it had no reality.
So the problem that will be cured by rest then is that without a cessation of work, not only a cessation of work, without rest, the human being becomes a machine. Take a look at the next paragraph. I'm sorry. I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm gonna skip ahead. Last three sentences of when it gets to the paragraph about Frankenstein. Take a look at this. Is the joy of possession an antidote to the terror of time, which grows to be a dread of inevitable death? Harry Potter fans, what is Voldemort afraid of? Death, right? What is he prepared to do to get eternal life? Kill everything, right? Things, when magnified, are forgeries of happiness. They are even eternal life, right? If you've got to drink unicorn blood, it's just not worth it. It's gross. They are a threat to our very lives. We are more harassed and supported by the Frankensteins of spatial things. So, for a minute to get into to English Lit, Frankenstein's essential in that it poses a very important industrial age, technological age question. Are we going to make technology more human, or will machinery make us more technological? One critic of the book of Frankenstein says that the problem that the inventor realizes is that his creation is more human than he is, this monster. Or if you think of Stanley Kubrick's classic 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the evil computer, HAL, right, takes over. What happens when the creator is supplanted by the creation? What happens when all we can do is to define ourselves by what we've made, to the point where what we made has become more powerful than us? Are we people, or are we machines? Think of the classic Charlie Chaplin sketch on the escalator. Is it the escalator that determines whether or not you go up or down, or is it you? Heschel sees the answer to this crisis of time in our enslavement to things as Sabbath rest. So let's jump to the question of rest. When the Romans met the Jews, Let's have a reader go there, please. When the Romans met the Jews, page...
Right under a palace of time.
Good.
That's the next page.
John, will you read that for us, please?
When the Romans met the Jews and noticed their strict adherence to the law of abstaining from labor on the Sabbath, their only reaction was contempt. The Sabbath is a sign of Jewish indolence, was the opinion of Juvenal, Seneca, and others.
Lazy Jews, right? Keep going. Yep.
In defense of the Sabbath, Philo, the spokesman of the Greek-speaking Jews of Alexandria, says, "On this day we are commanded to abstain from all work, not because the law inculcates slackness. Its object is rather to give man relaxation from continuous and unending toil, and by refreshing their bodies with a regularly calculated system of remissions, to send them out renewed to their old activity."
We're recharging, dude. Keep going.
For a breathing spell enables not merely ordinary people, but athletes also, to collect their strength with a strong force behind them, to undertake promptly and patiently each of the tasks set before them.
Okay, to which Heschel says, well, that's wonderful, Philo. You sound a lot like a Greek and not much like a Jewish philosopher. It's a very logical conclusion, but you've completely lost the point. The Sabbath, says Heschel, is not for the sake of the weekdays. It's not about recharging and rejuvenation. The weekdays are for the sake of the Sabbaths. The rest, the break, the not doing, the not making, the reflection informs the rest of the week. What kind of person am I? What kind of values do I have? How do I relate to others? And not just, did I get this done, did I get that done? It's not just about the to-do list, but the to-be list. And the Sabbath helps us to take that into the rest of the week. So, sorry, Philo, says Heschel, you've got it backwards. Okay, let's skip to the paragraph about menucha, which is the Hebrew word for rest. John, will you give me a page number one last time, please?
Right, when I printed these out, I rearranged it on David, and he didn't get what I said. He sent me the material, but then I rearranged it.
Bottom of 5? Good.
I find it very menucha.
Yeah. Let me get another reader, please.
You see it? It's the bottom of 5 or top of 6, right? Yeah, top of 6.
Okay, good. Read it. Yes.
Menucha, which we usually render with rest, means here much more than withdrawal from labor and exertion, more than freedom from toil, strain, or activity of any kind. Menucha is not a negative concept, but something real and intrinsically positive. This must have been the view of the ancient rabbis, as they believed that it took a special act of creation to bring it into being, that the universe would be incomplete without it.
Okay, so even a scholar like Heschel, who's studied for this lecture far more than I have, is frustrated at the lack of positive statements about what rest is. Keep going.
What was created on the seventh day? Tranquility, serenity, peace, and repose?
Yeah, it's not nothing. God didn't do nothing on the seventh day. By resting, God created tranquility, serenity, peace, and repose, the things that make us human more than a machine. Keep going.
To the biblical mind, menucha is the same as happiness and stillness, as peace and harmony. The word with which Job described the state of life he was longing for is derived from the same root as menucha. It is a state in which there is no strife and no fighting, no fear and no distrust. The essence of good life is menucha. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Not want. I'm not worried about what I want, what I need, what I did, what I'm going to plan. I'm in a phase, it's almost an Eastern religion's notion of not desiring. That makes me human. Keep going.
He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, the waters of menucha. In later times, menucha became a symbol for the life in the world to come, for eternal life.
So I want to conclude with this part in keeping with our working title of the Shabbat, the Sabbath, as a radical day of rest, or the radical notion of rest. He writes also in your handout, this is a radical departure from accustomed religious thinking. The mythical mind would expect that after heaven and earth have been established, God would create a holy place, a mountain, or a holy spring whereupon a sanctuary is to be established. Right at the end of the action film, you get one more splash bang fight scene. You don't end with, you don't get to a climax where there's, flowing water and tranquility and hugging and kissing. You've got to have, pyrotechnics first, right? The cherry on the sundae was rest. That doesn't seem to make sense. Yet, it seems as if to the Bible, it is holiness in time, the Sabbath, which comes first. When history began, there was only holiness. In the word, holiness in time. Thou shalt be holy, a holy people. The sanctity of time came first, the sanctity of man second, and the sanctity of space last. Time was hallowed by God, space by the tabernacle, which was created by a human being, by Moses. In conclusion, I would remind all of us, especially those of us 55 and younger, to consider not only the advantages, but the disadvantages of the information age and of the digital age, and of the importance, at the risk of indulging in the Via Negativa, of simply turning it off. As Heschel points out in his remarks, we didn't have time to get to everything he said, including information, not only information, but more importantly, wisdom and knowledge, especially in the information age. Turning it art is an art, and it is a discipline. My first time at this campus, I was generously put up at the guest house, and I woke up very early in the morning, and I went down to the lake, and the crew team was practicing. And as they came back in with their boat, and they kissed the boat, and they prepared to put the boat back in the boathouse, I said, "This is amazing." And one of the students said, "It's an indulgence." And I said, "This is an indulgence? If this is an indulgence, it's the most disciplined indulgence I've ever seen. This is an indulgence? You've got to be kidding me. You're practicing humility, teamwork, dignity, appreciation of nature. This is indulgence?" I don't know, right? We need to be able to turn it off, which is both an art and a discipline that demonstrates, as Heschel would say, the value of time and those we share our time on this earth with. The challenge of turning it off is not unique to our age, not. Every age has had to deal with this. Yes, it's different for our age in terms of the speed and efficiency of digital technology, but we're not the first to confront this problem. Rest does not have to be fun. It doesn't have to be beneficial. It doesn't have to recharge us for the rest of the week. It doesn't have to be exciting or relaxing. It is a practice of conveying values, an art, and a discipline, as Heschel would say. Indeed, rest has the power to help us live by our values and to value that we live. Thank you.
Before you clap, I just want to say thank you to Rabbi David, to remind you that if you would like more of that, students, we will be teaching a course here next semester. And again, anyone that would like to go with Brenna Horn and Vicki Leo to Rabbi David's house down in the cities and meet his wife who teaches at Carleton, and together they'll prepare a Shabbat meal and take you to synagogue. You can sign up with Brenna and Vicki. It'll be on November 2nd, right? The evening of November 2nd, which is a Friday. Thank you very much.
Do they need to get on the bus? We can't open it for questions? So for those of you who need to catch the bus, please don't feel that you're being rude. We're going to give you the chance to leave. If you wish to stay and we can have question and answer time, please feel free to stay. But I won't be insulted by those rushing off to do work and getting on the bus. Thank you. I got to turn down the lights in here.
I know, they're right on top of your head. I hope that water helps a little.
Yes, thank you. I hope you weren't offended by my asking you to get there.
Not at all. I hope that helps. Only if I have any more. I'm happy to say I found those
But we're
tissues in my pocket.
smile for the camera.
Oh. Stuart. Thanks, Stuart. Take care. I've got to run because my wife is expecting me.
All right,
down
very
the
good.
road.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you again.
Okay, to be fair to those of you, thank you. For those who wish to stay and ask questions, I'm going to ask two things of you. Please move towards the front so I don't have to shout, and I'll take your questions. Yes. The last line. You want me to repeat the last line? I'll repeat the last line. Herein beginneth the sermon, where I left the lecture and started to sermonize. Rest does not have to be fun. It doesn't have to be beneficial to the purpose of labor or tied to labor or even relaxing. It is an art, it is a discipline, it is a practice of conveying values. Indeed, rest has the power to help us live by our values and to value that we live. Here endeth the sermon. Yes?
What does the Talmud say about having sexual relations on the Sabbath? Is that permitted? Is that considered work as marital duty? Or is it considered part of God's creation? Or is it part relaxation and pleasure? How does the Talmud or Maimonides, how would they define that?
The Talmud, supported by Maimonides, not only permit but encourage sexual relations between husband and wife on the Sabbath as a celebration of creation and of the fulfillment, peru revu, be fruitful and multiply. So it is an exception in creating something new and a act, literally a procreative of act, but assuming that neither individual involved in this loving and consensual adult relationship is involved in doing this for any benefit outside of being in a loving relationship and building a family, then it's something that is not only permitted but blessed. Yes.
I was just wondering, like, if there's any thinkers within your faith that view work or rest as a complement to work rather than an antithesis.
Well, I think we saw that hypothesis tonight. We threw out several different working definitions, right, of rest, including the absence of work, or the Aristotelian argument of mutually sustaining opposites, life and death, work and rest, good and evil, men and women. So against that Aristotelian notion, we heard Heschel saying quite loudly, nice try, Philo, glad you got to read your Aristotle. When you want to argue Jewishly, come back and let's talk. It's not about plugging in the hybrid to the wall or warming up the car overnight so that I can use it in the morning or recharging your cell phone. It is not a recharge. Heschel's rejecting that squarely. That's not its point. The Sabbath doesn't exist to reinvigorate or recharge or empower the work week. It's just the opposite. The work week, the Sabbath informs the work week. It's what we experience in terms of rest that we hold on to. The work week exists so we can have the Sabbath. Sure. Can you tell me where what part of it needs more detail?
It seems that Sabbath defines the week. Was that a statement that you made?
Correct. Well, it's a statement Heschel made. In Heschel's worldview, the Sabbath and its emphasis on being over doing. Not that he rejects the material world. Judaism never renounces the material world, nor vilifies wanting things or the existence of things. It's when we worship things or all we care about is things. So yes, he would say that the Sabbath defines the week. The week doesn't define the Sabbath, because it is about a holiness sanctified through rest, which he argues is a form of love, and an expression of our love for God and for one another, as one of our participants said earlier, by being present. Not present in the task, but present in the moment. Does that help? We have an expression, "Ineim kemach ein Torah." When there's no flour or when there's no money, we can't have scripture, we can't have learning, we can't have wisdom. We're not saying that money is evil or that work is evil or that doing is bad. Just the opposite. We need to do. We can't repair injustice without work. We can't feed our families without work. It's when our definition and our self-estimation and our value of ourselves and others is so linked to work, inextricably linked to work, that we lose sight of what it means to be human. And we become the Hal in 2001, or we become the Frankenstein, this thing where the created has no fear or reverence for the creator or appreciation of its own existence and the gift that it's alive. Like the Voldemort complex, time isn't just another commodity. If you were watching TV in the 80s, there was a wonderful ad where people drove up to a fast food restaurant, a drive-in counter. They drove up to the window, and instead of ordering food, they order increments of time. Can I get a half hour? Can I just get a minute? I need 2 days. And they're charged X amount of money for this, right? It's not just about having more time. It is about what we're doing with this time, how we make it meaningful, which gets to an essential assumption of religions, and since part of what we're here is to do interfaith dialogue, a shared notion in Judaism and Christianity, a working assumption. See that life is meaningful. And it's not meaningful unless we make it so. And it's certainly not going to be meaningful if the only thing that means anything is what we do. It has to be about more than achievement, and more about what we earn, and more about what we own and possess. But rather about what we're becoming, who we're being. And that is what the Sabbath is about. Through the humility of rest, we're forced to realize how marvelous what we already have is. Yes, and then yes.
Also thinking that we antecedent to work or anything else, we are, and that's value in itself. And that we, even after we cannot work or are productive, we still have the blessing of being. And again, I think there's negative way, but we're just not utilitarian.
No. No, we're not computers, and we are not automobiles. And the question that we have to answer as the industrial age, or now we call it the information age, or digital age continues, is what is the purpose of our existence other than the to-do list? What is the purpose and the value of existence beyond what we achieve and what we make? And we're not just designed to do, but to think and to feel and experience, and those things have intrinsic value. You talk about, What if, you were in a physical state where you could no longer do? My father died about 9 years ago of Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. Part of its humiliation was that he could no longer do. So a neuro-ophthalmologist, a surgeon, a researcher, a father, a grandfather, a husband, a skier, a walker, a reader, he couldn't do any of those things. He would say, I'm entirely acted upon. I do not act. Judaism and Christianity refuses to believe that such a life is devoid of value. That's putting it mildly. Judaism and Christianity insists that such a life still has great value. It's not just about what we do and how we act upon a thing, but in the joy of being, that the gift of it.
There's a statement that Heschel has probably outside of this book on the Sabbath, just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy. I love that so much that Sarah love it so much that we put it on our birth announcement for our first one. Just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy. Totally non-functional.
Seems a lot of this conversation is kind of what I call an I-thou relationship.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Opposed to where is the concept of the Sabbath of community? Because creation is creation of all of us. It was not just creation of one of us by the Creator. It was creation of all these other blessings that we had. Kind of thing. And you said earlier, when we go to the synagogue, I think we go to other churches on the Sabbath, which is a communitarian event. So how do we intersect this kind of personal piece, which I've heard a lot about, rest, with the community?
Right, and we could have a whole nother lecture, a series of lectures about in Judaism and Hebrew what we call kehilah, a congregation or a community. And particularly now, the need for that seems to be stronger than ever, and what so many people are looking for and don't quite know how to find it. Yes, the Sabbath is virtually impossible to experience without community. I say virtually impossible in that it's technically possible, and it could be deeply personally meaningful to have Sabbath entirely on one's own. There would be nothing sinful about it. But of course, as you suggest, something huge would be missing, and that of kehilah, of community, that we celebrate the Sabbath together. So I'll give you a for instance that's sadly funny. So a rabbinic couple, husband-wife, rabbi team, want to very much model the importance of the Sabbath to their family. There's just one problem: they work on Shabbat, right? Just as the priests here among us know that they're working all day Sunday, leading the Mass, giving the sermon, greeting folks. Arguably, that's the day that we're working hardest, running around to the children's service, the adult service, the bar mitzvah, the bat mitzvah, the reception. So to solve this problem of not having a family Shabbat while being a rabbinic Jewish family, they decided to move Shabbat to Thursday. Okay. So, I hear a laugh over here. The problem is that I've now solved the problem in a very utilitarian, a very to-do, right? A very formula way, rather than engaging the problem itself, right? I'll just buy more time, right? We'll just borrow more money. That you haven't addressed the spending problem or the time management problem, right? It is in community that we reinforce and where we strengthen the Sabbath and the holidays. The power of reading from a Torah scroll, the power of the Mass, the power of the processional, the power of song. You can have a beautiful solo all by yourself. Some of us more beautiful than others, but one could. But it is the shared experience of the lectionary, of what we call the Parsha, the Torah reading, the shared experience of people coming up to share life cycle events, what we call kehilah, that sense of community, that is essential to the Sabbath. When you go through an observant community and see the people walking to and from synagogue or to and from lunch at each other's houses, you're reminded of how this isn't just a discipline or an art or an observance practiced by a particular family or a particular sect or a particular denomination. Wow, this is really a value in this community, right? I drive through this community and I notice this. I drive this, through this community, I notice that. Yes, community is absolutely essential to it for it to work at its deepest and most profound level. Yes?
I'm wondering if there's any differentiation in the different expressions of Judaism between Sabbath work versus service. In other words, service of neighbor, service of someone in need, does that fall into a different category than work and employment?
Good. I'll tell you a great story. So, at least I think it's a great story. You can decide if it's great. Temple Israel of Minneapolis brought in a guest speaker, Rabbi Lawrence Kushner. He's the leading Reform rabbi when it comes to Hasidic literature, and he presented on the question of the Sabbath. And somebody says, but Rabbi, mowing my lawn, I'm not a professional lawn mower, I'm not a gardener, I'm not in the lawn business, right? Mowing my lawn feels good, it's restful for me. To which Kushner replies, well, that's great, then mow your neighbors. So this speaks to your question about social justice. What if my neighbor is infirm, my neighbor is poor, my neighbor can't afford a lawnmower, my neighbor certainly can't afford a lawn service, right, or snow service. Why can't I fulfill that mitzvah on the Sabbath? Well, the reason why you're discouraged from fulfilling the mitzvah on the Sabbath, is because this is the halachic answer, the Jewish legal answer is, this is God's day of rest. And if God can take time, and somebody who's infinite, right, can take time, can't people who are finite take one day from social obligations, community obligations, social justice duties? Yes, we're told to clothe the naked and to feed the hungry. We're also told to observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. So the social justice standard set traditionally, okay, not necessarily in the modern Jewish world or by a majority of Jews, but the exception where social justice or intervention would come into the mix is the Jewish principle of what's called pikuach nefesh, the saving of a life. So if I notice that my neighbor, Jewish or non-Jewish, has slipped and fallen on the ice, at this point all bets are off, and I'm free to run into my house, get the keys, right, shovel the walkway so I can safely get them in the car without further injury. If I have to hail a cab and spend money to get them to the hospital, I'm free to do all those things. And the rabbis put the standard of pikuach nefesh, the saving of a life, as even something as non-threatening as a sty in the eye. I personally love that one because my dad was an ophthalmologist. Even as something as seemingly trivial as an eye infection, you may violate the Sabbath, you may hire a doctor, you may run to the doctors, you can take the car to the doctors for this. I was once in an Orthodox shul, a little girl bangs her head on a pew and splits, needs stitches, there's blood all over the place. And, believe me, that they didn't argue because of the Sabbath that they weren't taking her to the hospital. They got a towel and they put her in the car and took her to the hospital and got her stitched up, and they didn't wait till the Sabbath was over to do it. But the simple answer to your question is no, we don't do the food drive or the walkathon or the phone-a-thon for funds on the Sabbath, and the fact that it is a social justice effort and not a personal gain effort doesn't excuse us in and of itself from the Sabbath. Saving a life would, an emergency situation would. Yes, follow up.
So in Jesus'
That's a really good, what we would call halachic question, a really good legal question. If the animal creates a public hazard or a public nuisance, if I could argue that the animal's discomfort could lead to a traffic accident, somebody's going to, run into this thing, right, or it's going to start a fight, which could be fatal. But in and of itself, if the animal can, if the animal could survive the injury over the course of the Sabbath, then no, you cannot pull the animal out of the pit if it's after sundown on Friday night. Could you encourage a Gentile to do so, and would kindness to animals, a Jewish principle called Tsar Ba'alei Chaim, responsibility for all living things, get you out of what would otherwise be a prohibited move of solving this problem by getting somebody non-Jewish to do it because of the principle of kindness to other living things? Probably. I would have to look it up talmudically, though. So I'm engaging in conjecture. Yes. Enjoying the family meal. Putting out, making sure that it is the best meal of the week, but both emotionally, socially, as a family, and quite materially. The Hasidic authorities make this quite clear. If you can only afford meat once a week, it better be Friday night dinner or Saturday morning lunch. This is part of how you're going to look forward to the Sabbath, even if it's just for the food. So it is supposed to be celebrated at hearth and home and literally at your table. Another is singing. You're supposed to sing what are called zmirot, songs of praise, many of which focus on the Sabbath and how wonderful the Sabbath is. So one of the things you're supposed to do is song. Another thing you're encouraged to do is take a nap, but napping isn't the full extent of rest. Another thing you can do is to attend worship services. If you are in a very observant community, that means going to synagogue anywhere between 3 to 5 times in that 24-hour period. And of course, the study of Scripture, the study of Torah. On Saturday. So if you go to an observant community after the morning worship service, which goes on quite some time, and then lunch, and then the afternoon service, and with a evening service and end of Shabbat service yet to come, there is what's called the rabbi's shiur, the rabbi's lesson, where the rabbi will teach Talmud, or something that's called the rabbi's tish. Tish is the Yiddish word for table, being at the rabbi's table where discretionary Torah study, scripture study takes place. So not for the purpose of rabbinical training, not for the purpose of our equivalent of catechism, right, of Hebrew school, religious school. It's called Torah lishma, Torah for its own sake. So those are the things that are encouraged, and even though they involve intellectual effort, they are safely protected and ordained as rest. Yes?
I'm from Los Angeles, and I live in a Jewish neighborhood.
Can we have the Lakers back?
But I live in a Jewish neighborhood of a lot of Orthodox and conservative Jews. And this happened a couple of years ago. On Sabbath, I was walking down the street with a St. John's University sweatshirt on. And a small boy, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, ran out of the house, and he asked me if I could come in and turn their gas stove on. And he asked me, are you Goyim? And I said, yes. And so I went in and did that. But is that so much work
Right. It shouldn't have, in that community, it shouldn't have been on. And the child is trying to, actually the parent of the child is trying to engage in a loophole around the loophole. Running to a Gentile and saying, can you please do this thing for me, is prohibited in many communities as a way to solve the problem of turning the stove on and off, or the TV on and off, or the radio on and off. But only adults are fully obligated for mitzvot, for all commandments, and hence the word bar or bat mitzvah, son or daughter of the commandments. It's not until a child turns, 12 or 13, that they are obligated and charged with, on their own spiritual scorecard, all religious mitzvot, all religious obligations. So by using the child as a runner, right, as a carrier, and by taking advantage of your identity as a Gentile, folks are looking for an exception, a loophole. As a Reform Jew, as somebody who turns the stove on and off, who turns the car on and off, these behaviors seem to me to be contradictory, strange, and not in keeping with the spirit of the Sabbath. Having said that, that's just my personal perspective, and within the context and values of that community, what that child did and what they asked you to do is deeply authentic and grounded in religious integrity for them. It's not how I would want to solve the problem, but to them, that is in keeping with their religious practice and their religious values.
Also, in this community on Sabbath, children and the parents or the father will go outdoors and play games, catch football, play baseball in the front yard lawn, and things like that, or ride bicycles around the neighborhood. Is that permitted to, play sports games with your kids?
So in an observant community, right, parts of St. Louis Park or parts of L.A., New York, etc., every family is its own, what we call mara da'atra, its own maker and enforcer of the rules. Some families would say you could only ride the bicycle around our block, but can't go beyond that. I know an Orthodox family in St. Louis Park where the son plays competitive baseball but does not play a game on Friday night or Saturday morning. So if there's weekday games, that's fine, or if they're on Sunday, that's fine. But from sundown Saturday to Friday till sundown on Saturday, he will not play competitive baseball. Can he play catch with his father? Yes. Could he play touch football with his friends? Probably. Although there are communities where they would say any playing ball and any physical recreation is a violation of the Sabbath, not because it's work, but because it's not dignified, because it's not respectful. So I'll give you an interesting one. Orthodox friend of mine says that his son may go to the baseball game for his friends and cheer them on. He may play catch with them before the game starts. But he says, Abba, Daddy, can I go warm up the pitcher? Daddy says, no. Well, why not? You let me play catch, you let me go to the game and root for my friends. Warming up the pitcher has a distinct, discrete purpose of getting your teammate ready for the game, which is not only about recreation, but about competition. So now your act of throwing the ball back and forth, which was no different when we were just doing it for fun, when it becomes about warming up the pitcher, has now, well, it's not merely that it's so much labor, but it's now no longer respecting the spirit of the Sabbath. Yes?
I have a friend who's a Jew, and he's in the Marines right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like to know, what does Judaism have to say about Jews serving in combat on days of
For the obligation of defending one's country and the life and limb of your fellow soldiers, Judaism allows one, encourages one to participate in acts of war on the Sabbath and festivals in cases of self-defense. If a battalion has the flexibility to give its Jewish members the choice not to be engaged in combat on the Sabbath, then that would be wonderful. But Jewish law, going back to Maimonides, who we studied a little tonight, and before, allows for acts of self-defense on the Sabbath and festivals. I'll stay on my feet as long as they keep raising hands. Yes?
I so much appreciated, Rabbi, the way you struggle with what seemed to be perhaps unimportant, simple question about real life. For instance, the question about turning off the gas stove. You were respectful of people making their own decision, kind of saying, I would have not done it. How would you have done it, or would you have done it? Obviously, somebody turned it on, but it wasn't you, or with your permission, but you discovered so was it. How did you?
In my home, in my Reform practice of Judaism, so of the major movements in the world, Reform is the most liberal, or if you're on the left-right spectrum, we are the most left. And this goes back to an essential question that Reform Judaism owes to Christianity in terms of questioning ritual for the sake of ritual, questioning repetition for the sake of repetition. If the second iteration teaches or reinforces something that the first one didn't, great. If saying the prayer that many times brings in something new, wonderful. But if the point of this rite, R-I-T-E, not R-I-G-H-T, is performing rites, then going all the way back to the prophet Isaiah, we have the critique. Israel, your fasts and your Sabbaths, disgust me. Don't come up here giving me sacrifices of incense and livestock, and then go home and oppress a stranger and beat your worker, deprive them of their pay, striking out with a cruel fist, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. So I don't find meaning or purpose nor inspiration in refraining from lighting a gas stove on the Sabbath or turning on and off lights. For me, that's not a violation of the Sabbath. I don't consider it work, nor do I consider it a compromise of Sabbath rest. There are those who do. There are those who do. Why don't I value it that way? Well, I was brought up in a Reformed Jewish household. I was acculturated and socialized to be skeptical of practices at the other end of the religious spectrum. Just as many of you in this room were brought up with a particular kind of Christianity and probably absorbed by osmosis or by training, explicit training, suspicions and critiques of other forms of Christianity. So these particular ritual practices don't move me. The fact, having said that, the fact that they don't move me does not give me license to belittle others or to suggest that others are hypocritical or to imply that others don't care. We all engage in picking and choosing which obligations and which mitzvot are the most meaningful and most important. Every choice we make is ultimately a values choice. And it's not my place nor my role nor my wish to belittle others. You asked me how I would have solved it. It wouldn't have been my problem, because turning on and off lights or on and off the stove isn't problematized in my home. What is a problem for me is refraining from writing the sermon or the lecture on the Sabbath, or explaining to my kids, do we really need to do that homework, or do we need to watch that TV show now? Do I need to return that work email on the Sabbath? unless somebody is dying or I'm doing a pastoral call or comforting the bereaved, do I really need to be doing my work, even if it is rabbinic or clergy work, right now? And what kind of Sabbath discipline and what kind of Sabbath art am I practicing? And those, getting back to our first word that that we heard here tonight about rest, that's a reflection that I welcome, and where I wish I were more rigorous, to be perfectly honest. So it's not as if Dave Wirtschafter has this all figured out. It's a constant state of self-examination, and hopefully in a constructive way pushing yourself to do more, to say, how could this discipline refrain from activity lend to a more meaningful life? I'll take one last question, and then we really do need to scoot before the custodians throw us out. Yes?
More of a comment than a question, a little bit different perspective. It was in my German class today, the students are learning the reflexive verb, and the verb for to rest came up by chance. In German, ausruhen, literally to rest out, and I mentioned that, well, in English, we would say to rest up. But what do those little up and out then mean when you think about resting? Up is certainly positive feeling. You're going to rest up, you're going to take a rest down, you're going to take a rest in.
We have downtime now, which is interesting, and you're right. We do have rest up, which is implying that the rejuvenation and recharge thing. It's not rest for its own sake, or because it's an amatio die, but for the purpose. So it's important again to keep examining this thing we call rest, and why are we so uncomfortable with the notion of stillness, that we can't. So threatened by the notion that if we're not doing something, that we're not being something. So it's interesting, your point, how language informs the value or devalue that we place on rest. I'm going to leave there. Thank you.